Communication from the Department of City Development relating to the North 27th Street corridor, alternative analysis from West Highland Boulevard to West Wisconsin Avenue. Should actually be St. Paul, but to West Wisconsin Avenue in the 4th Aldermanic District. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. We'd like to share with the committee this morning the results of a analysis that was done by the department in conjunction with Avenues West and some of the West Side businesses, as well as the Sohi District, and of course with the full concurrence of Alderman Bauman. Matter of fact, I might add at his request. And I think we're very pleased that we have representatives this morning from PDI Graef, who conducted the analysis. They're going to go through the findings. And one of the reasons we did this is because there's an opportunity for us to take state funding that has been allocated for North 27th Street for repaving, as well as some streetscaping money that's been made available through another grant process, as well as the ongoing commitment from the folks that we've been working with in the Business Improvement District, as well as the Sohi District and the neighborhood, to really make a substantial change on North 27th Street. And Alderman Bauman challenged us to not just look at it as a repaving project, to in fact look at it with a blue sky approach. What could we do if we really put our minds down to it? How could we provide some type of transformative reconstruction of the street? So with that as our guide, we instructed and asked our consulting team to do exactly that. The one thing I would caution, though, I think it's a very exciting concept, and I think you'll all admit that it does have a real appeal to it. If this were to be implemented, it would result in the city having to acquire some property. And the one thing that I want to be very clear, and particularly to the property owners, this is not a property acquisition strategy that we're putting forward this morning. This is simply a communications file, blue sky thinking, what could be done. It does not put the city, not committing the city to a position to acquire any property at all, but rather to really start a process with the street, and which has been ongoing, to figure out whether or not this makes some sense to move it forward. And if it does, then we'd have to look at whether or not the city could muster the financial resources or grants, as we've already been successful in mustering some grants to date for the street, to actually implement all or a portion of this. So I think with that in mind, I just wanted to make sure that folks, particularly those who may be watching this, that have businesses or property on 27th Street that might be impacted under this scenario, that we're not asking the committee to make a decision, nor are we recommending at this point anything. But really this is the culmination of some work that Alderman Bauman has been working very closely with us on, and I might add Avenues West as well as our Sohi District as partners. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Larry Witzling from PDI Graef, who can walk us through the results of the analysis.
Good morning. My name is Larry Witzling from PDI Graef. I'm going to ask Christy to distribute copies of the PDF presentation, and I will try to make this on the short side, so if I skip over some parts that need additional explanation, please just ask questions.
Larry, could you explain what's an alternative analysis? Because I think the Commissioner made an excellent point. This is not a redevelopment plan. This is not a tax incremental district plan. This is not a plan that has any binding effect on anybody or anything at this point. What is an alternative?
It's an analysis, and it's very specific. It's very limited. This slide lists three very specific options that we were asked to analyze and look at the potential cost, very ballpark, and the land use impacts of these three directions, and to investigate each of those alternatives. And in some cases there was existing material that we used. In some cases there were some new ideas that we drew up. And the three alternatives that we were asked to analyze are leaving everything the way it is in terms of the development and the buildings, but retain the existing character, essentially repave and add streetscape. The second alternative we were asked to look at is actually on this screen what is listed as 2A. Create an arterial boulevard with a median. And the third alternative we were asked to look at was a tunnel. Now, I should back up one picture. This is the project area, and we actually extended the project area a little bit as our contract defined it. The project area went from Highland down to Wisconsin. We thought, after a lot of discussion with the community groups and staff, that it made sense to think about going a little bit further south down towards St. Paul, although that southern edge is a little vague as to exactly where the analysis should stop. So we were to look at these three alternatives and estimate the land use impacts and the cost estimates for each of these three. 2B, alternative 2B, is something that came up during the course of the process, and we were not asked to provide a cost estimate for that. This is, again, a very tight budget. I'm going to describe each of these three alternatives. Basically, there's the existing street section, a typical boulevard, and what we just named for the convenience in the context of this document, a grand boulevard street section. And I'll talk about all three of those. The first typical street section is 64 feet wide. There's a little typo. This is supposed to be 11 feet, not 64 feet. This is essentially the existing street. Comments about the existing street are the sidewalk widths are a little bit tight in terms of trying to do any kind of outdoor sidewalk cafes or things like that, and even for general pedestrian movement. Secondly, on 27th Street, if this is going to take the amount of traffic that DOT wants it to take, the parking lanes would have to probably be driving lanes during rush hours. There may be some way to balance that between on-street parking in non-rush hour periods. And the cost estimate for this, which is basically given to us, the city has some good numbers on this, that the repaving was around $2.1 million, of which 1.8 was state and 300,000 was local. And then the streetscape, which I believe was also state funded, is another $1 million. So this is kind of the base alternative. We didn't do any original analysis for this. We just there was no need to sort of redo it. We're looking for ballpark numbers. The second option was essentially to create a median from Wisconsin up to Highland. We looked at a variety of sub-options, like the possibility of a roundabout where it crosses Juneau. Maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't. But the big issue with this median is that it would then require an 84-foot width right-of-way, which would involve expanding the road and taking down buildings on one side or the other, or maybe some combination of both. Again, we were looking here, big picture issues. We did a rough sum total of the assessed value, 125% of assessed value on each side of the street. On the west side, which I don't think we had before, Alderman Bauman, when we spoke, it was about $7.4 million of assessed value. On the east side, it's about $6.7 million, and that's just from Juneau to Wisconsin. I don't think we went down to St. Paul for that.
Check. We did go all the way down.
Oh, okay, includes down to St. Paul.
Yes.
The third option we looked at, and I want to say that in the conversations which we've had with a lot of the property owners and other businesses in the community, there seems to be, I would say, a general leaning towards some version of this option as a preferred direction, notwithstanding all the items that Commissioner Marcoux mentioned. In this option, and I'm going to back up a few slides here just to describe it. In this option, essentially from Highland down to Wells, or I think it's from State down to Wells. Essentially, the street stays the way it is, and the streetscape is used. But between Wells and going south, possibly to St. Paul, the street is redesigned into what we are referring to as some sort of a grand boulevard. And by that, we mean the traffic runs down the center of the street, as you see right here in this cross-section. There are two side service aisles. They're not really frontage roads. I'm going to skip forward and then come back. These side aisles are modeled after historic boulevards. This is one in New York City that Olmsted did called Eastern Parkway, and this is one that was just recently done in San Francisco, and you can see the two side aisles here and here. And what those side drive lanes do, and actually the city of Milwaukee has some of these, except but it doesn't have the landscape that makes them really attractive places. The idea in this model is to essentially use these side lanes as a place for pedestrian movement and surface parking. However, the right-of-way is 164 feet when you do this. There are examples of this, and this is fairly typical. The reason for locating it on these two blocks between Michigan and Wells was that